You're listening to Murder Not Murdering with Erin,
And Autumn,
a true crime podcast about murder and murdering.
but we are not murderers.
All right, everybody, we are back at Murder Not Murdering with Erin, and
Autumn.
sorry it wasn't a new episode on Monday, but Autumn was at the Seahawks game, so unfortunately, she was not available for recording.
Nope, because I'm too cool for school.
And we did lose, but it was a pretty good game, I have to say.
I know, I'm really bummed, but
And I don't know if you guys know, Autumn is like a wild football fan.
this is true. The Huskies and the Seahawks.
Yeah. I'm more of a baseball gal myself. And the Mariners are kind of fucking killing it right now. So
I
that's
know.
awesome.
I really hope that we clinch it. I
Did
really
you
do.
see that they had Lou Piniella throw the ball, though? I nearly died. That made me so
No.
happy.
So I'm not a huge baseball fan,
I do
and it
know.
bored me. My brother is the super fan of the world, and he played baseball, and I had to go to all those games and whatnot. But I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna watch the game, the first playoff game," and we
Sure.
lost.
I was there.
At the first playoff game?
No, the one right before the playoff
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
So the first playoff game, I watched that, and we lost. So then I went back to my pattern of not giving a shit about watching it, and we won. So I guess I'm just not going to watch any more games.
Yeah, that's good because it was your fault.
It was. Like, people that are superstitious, sorry I watched the game. I
If
will
they
not do
lose,
it
I'm gonna
again.
send you a text and be like, "You better not fucking be watching."
That's true. That is what you should do. If it is happening, remind me, do not be peeking at the TV. I am bad luck.
Now, I don't know if any of you all know, but there's kind of a rivalry between the 49ers and the Seahawks.
This is
And
true.
when we went to San Francisco, Autumn wore her Seahawks jersey all through
Yes, I did.
Alcatraz and all over the city.
And I had Erin take a picture of me with my
Oh, yeah,
Seahawks jersey and the Golden Gate Bridge in the background.
that is correct. Yeah. Sorry for our listeners from San Francisco.
I'm not sorry.
No. Autumn will never be sorry. Down with the 49ers. Ha 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 ha. Anyways, I'm really excited about today's episode because we have finally reached October, which means we are in spooky season.
Yes, we are.
And this is
My
the
favorite
literal
time of the
best.
year.
And my case is on witchcraft and such. So I'm leaning
Ooh,
into it. I think, Autumn, you are going to also be leaning into it because you texted
you'll
me and
just
said,
have to see.
Autumn said, "You're going to like my episode." So I figured that must mean you're doing something Halloween related or related to something
Mm.
spooky because those are my favorites.
She just knows me too well. I can't really say much to her without her actually knowing what's happening.
Yeah, that's why we don't tell each other anything.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'd be like, "Oh my god." Um, so anyways, I'm very excited about this. I'm excited to keep diving into more cases as I'm researching. I have only like 185 ideas.
Only. Okay.
So it's
Nice.
definitely hard for me to narrow down the cases, but I did this one because I thought it would be one that I haven't done and an interesting one.
Okay. Well, let's go right on into it because
All
I am
right.
excited.
So today I'm going to be telling the story of the Ouija board murder. Ooh.
That's exciting. I'm down.
Yeah. I have one out right now to tell the story. I'm having a ghost tell
It's
me.
a lie. You're lying.
I am 100% lying.
Madam
I
Leota, you only wish.
If you didn't, well, I dressed up as her a couple years ago.
I know you did.
And here's the thing, if you guys don't like it, it was written by Madame Leota.
There we go. We'll blame
There we
her.
go. Yeah, I blame her. Okay, here we go. Buffalo, New York, March 1930. It's a city of smoke and snow, a city of steel mills, of canals and cold winds that howl off Lake Erie, a place where industry hums and the streets are slick with the mud of early spring. But behind the brick facades and shop windows, another world flickers. Parlors with their lights dimmed, tables ringed with candles, and hands pressed lightly on a planchette. People here, like everywhere in America, are chasing whispers from beyond the grave. The Great War left behind too many ghosts. The influenza pandemic carved through families, and the Great Depression was settling in. And when the world feels cruel, cruel enough to cut you down in your prime, people turn to voices, even if those voices come sliding across a Ouija board. On the east side of Buffalo, in a modest home, a Seneca woman named Nancy Bowen sat grieving her husband in just such a parlor. She was a healer, known in her community for herbs. But that night, she wasn't listening to her ancestors. She was listening to the board. And what it would tell her would lead to one of the strangest murders of the 20th century, a killing the newspapers of the time would call the witch slaying by Ouija. Nancy Bowen was born around 1866, and she was 66 years old at the time of the murder. Buffalo, New York in 1930 was not an easy place to be an indigenous woman. The Seneca Nation had been pushed and pressed by settlers and colonizers alike. Their culture was commodified. Their presence was ignored, and often they were vilified as justification of the atrocities done to their people. Nancy walked a careful line between tradition and survival. She was a respected Cayuga healer and herbalist known by her community for her practice of traditional medicine. She wasn't rich, and she wasn't powerful. People came to her for cures. Nancy was married to a sassafras merchant named Charlie Bowen, whose nickname was Sassafras Charlie, which I think is the best nickname I've ever
That
heard.
is pretty awesome.
They lived a happy, peaceful, and beautiful life together until suddenly Charlie died. Nancy was devastated and grief stricken. She was finding it difficult to get through the days without her dear Charlie. So she began to look outside her own spirituality to find places to contact him. She was close friends with another Seneca Cayuga woman named Lila Jimerson. Lila was about half Nancy's age, vibrant and energetic, and she owned a Ouija board. One night, Lila and Nancy sat in a dark room lit by candles, and they tried to reach Charlie in a seance. Almost immediately, the candle's flames flickered. They knew the spirit was with them. It began by spelling out the word BEYOND, beyond, as if the spirit was trying to confirm where they were. Then it said THEYKILLEDME. They killed me. Nancy was frantic to know who could have killed Charlie.
Yeah,
He
who
did
killed Charlie?
he did die suddenly. Not Sassafras Charlie.
Not him.
The board answered back with the name, Clotilde, and it added the killer's address on Buffalo's Riley Street. But Nancy didn't know anyone by that name. Lila did. She knew of a woman who was married to Henri Marchand. He was French, a sculptor celebrated for his dioramas and murals. His work was displayed at natural history museums. Lila told her that she had modeled for him, so she knew his wife. Then Nancy began to receive letters in the mail from a Mrs. Dooley, also someone she'd never met. In the letters, they said that Clothilde Marchand was actually a white witch who had hexed Sassafras Charlie. He was known to people as a tribal healer, and Clotilde had hexed him because she was jealous of that. After her witchcraft didn't work, she had to kill him herself. It even stated that Nancy would be next, and the only way to prevent it would be to kill the white witch. For Nancy, already grieving, already raw, it felt real. And with her friend beside her nodding, her paranoia grew. Her heart was broken, and Nancy needed a way to turn her grief into justice, believing her precious Charlie had been killed. This witch had to be stopped. March 6th, 1930. A gray afternoon in Buffalo. Clothilde Marchand was at home. Henri was away, working in his studio. The doorbell rang. On the stoop, Nancy Bowen, small, elderly, wrapped in a coat. She clutched a slip of paper with an address in her shaky hand. Clotilde answered. Nancy asked if the Frenchwoman was married to Henri Marchand. According to Nancy, Clotilde was dismissive and rude, and then she asked her if she was a witch. She replied, yes. Nancy accused her. You bewitched my husband. You killed him. Clotilde blinked in disbelief. What are you talking about? But Nancy wasn't here for words. She pulled a hammer from her bag. The first blow struck Clotilde across the temple. She fell screaming. Nancy struck again and again. Blood sprayed across the walls. Then she took a paper soaked in chloroform and shoved it down Clotilde's throat. Not long after, Marchand's 12-year-old son Henry came home from school to their house at 576 Riley Street to find his mother sprawled across their first floor landing. Henry ran to the Science Museum to get his father. Police were called, and at first they thought that Clotilde's death was the result of a fall down the stairs. But the medical examiners soon found bloody gashes, the odor of chloroform, and signs of a furious struggle on the body of the tiny Frenchwoman. This was not an accident. This was a murder. The neighbors heard the screaming and led police to the reservation, as many Indigenous people were working as models for Henri, and they were seen around the house frequently. Now, they don't explain exactly why they went to Nancy Bowen, but they arrested her quickly, and Nancy confessed to the murder right away. Clotilde was a prominent woman in society and married to an even more prominent man. The newspapers jumped on this story immediately. It was obvious to most that Nancy Bowen was not a hardened criminal. She hadn't planned an escape. She was arrested within hours, explained the whole situation, that it was about witchcraft, and how she was seeking justice for her murdered husband. In her house, the police found the letters that she had received, notes warning her that Clotilde was a witch written in a disguised hand, notes urging her to take action before she was killed too. In the handwriting, it wasn't Nancy's. The police did not take Nancy seriously at first. But as she began to explain the sequence of events, that she had a seance with Lila Jimerson, then the letters started arriving. The police began to uncover a sinister murder plot staged by Lila, because Lila was having an affair with Henri Marchand. So now both Nancy and Lila are arrested for the murder of Clotilde. Suddenly, the press had a story that was irresistible: a love triangle, a Ouija board, a witch murder. The Buffalo Courier ran headlines that practically dripped with sensationalism. Witch slayer held. Ouija board gave order to kill. Originally, newspapers were pushing that these native women had used witchcraft to ruin the happy Marchand family. But everything was definitely not as it seemed. Reporters crowded the courthouse. They wanted to see the Seneca healer, bent with age, who had killed a Frenchwoman with a hammer because a board spelled the word witch. They also wanted the glamour, Henri, the sculptor, and Lila, the mistress with the dark eyes. Now, like I said, Henri was known for his wax figures and dioramas. But to get the realistic looks, he used Indigenous women to pose for him. He said, are you ready for this?
Ready.
On the stand, he said it was a professional necessity to seduce and make love to the native women because it made them more willing to pose naked for his dioramas. He also said that his wife knew of his free love lifestyle and that Lila was one of, quote, too many to count. He bragged about enchanting the women and how easy it was for him. The press and the court gasped at his admissions, and they were disgusted. He was a predator who used his position to get what he wanted. He had led Lila to believe that he was going to leave his wife for her and that they were in love. And I personally think that Henri made Lila think that the only way they could be together was if his wife was out of the way, manipulating her to find a way to commit the murder. Again, personal opinion.
Mhm.
And the opportunity came when the morning Nancy Bowen went to Lila. After the seance, when Nancy didn't spring to action, Lila was the one who began sending the letters. By the end of March 1930, Buffalo just wasn't a steel town anymore. It was the stage for one of the strangest trials America had ever seen. And what happened inside that courtroom would expose not just a murder, but a tangled web of jealousy, spiritualism, and prejudice. Buffalo's Hall of Justice, May 1930. A crowd pressed in from every angle. Reporters, gawkers, and neighbors who wanted a glimpse of the witch slayer. Some who came for morbid curiosity, some came for scandal, and some came because the depression had left them with too much time and not enough distractions. Nancy Bowen entered the courtroom, bent but dignified. 66 years old, Seneca, her hair pinned back, her eyes hollowed from grief and fear. The newspapers described her as stooped, shriveled, and ancient. They painted her like a crone out of fairy tales. She did look weathered from her grief, and people that worked hard back then aged differently. But this was something more. They played on racism to make her out to be the very picture of a witch. The defense told a different story. Nancy had been tricked, manipulated, preyed upon. She was a grieving widow haunted by superstition, pushed to violence by the lies of another. In her own testimony, Nancy spoke plainly with her voice shaking. The Ouija board said Clotilde was a witch, said she killed my husband. I believed it. She spoke of the letters slipped under the door, anonymous, warning her that Clothilde Marchand was dangerous. She believed them. She believed Lila Jimerson, who sat just rows away, poised and watchful. To the jury, it was a strange sight. An old woman on the stand confessing to murder, but pointing the finger at another. The press exploded with Indian woman slays witch, hammer used in Ouija killing. Some papers barely disguised their racism, describing Nancy as a primitive sorceress who lived in heathen fear. And of course, they used a lot more racist words that I will not be repeating. The truth was far more complicated, but the truth sold fewer copies than witchcraft. Nancy Bowen pled guilty to manslaughter. In some good news, if you can call it that, most people were sympathetic, knowing that she was grieving and trying to grasp at a chance to speak to her husband. And they saw how manipulated she was and how remorseful she was. A year after the murder, she was released from jail with a sentence of time served. She went back to the reservation and lived out the rest of her days, which only lasted a few years more. If Nancy was painted as the witch slayer, then Lila Jimerson was cast as the femme fatale. The prosecution accused her outright. She had written the letters. She had guided the Ouija board. She had convinced Nancy that Clotilde was a witch. And why? Jealousy. If Clotilde were gone, Henri would be hers. Lila denied it all. She said Nancy was mistaken. She said the board had moved on its own. For Lila, there would be 2 trials. She collapsed during the first trial due to an ongoing respiratory issue, and it was declared a mistrial. Then, she pled guilty to second-degree murder from her hospital bed, but retracted the plea as soon as she could. Henri Marchand himself was called to testify. He wept on the stand, describing how he found his wife's body. But under cross-examination, his tears dried fast as the affair with Lila emerged. The polished French sculptor was seen as an adulterer who cared very little for the women he was with. But with Lila's steadfast denials and the circumstantial letters, the case weakened. And also, fun fact, and Autumn, you're going to be so angry.
Oh, God.
By the time of the second trial, Henri had moved to Albany and he had remarried his wife's 18-year-old niece.
That is repulsive.
He was in his 50s.
That is repulsive.
He was never held accountable for the emotional manipulation he played on Lila. Nowadays, I think that would have played out differently. But back to Lila. She was acquitted and set free, even though I believe she too would have been convicted in this day and age for her part in the manipulations of Nancy Bowen. But she didn't walk out unscathed. In the eyes of Buffalo society, Lila was tainted forever. The scandal clung to her name. The headlines called her the Ouija woman, the mistress witch of murder. Henri Marchand never escaped the scandal either, and his work would be much less sought after post-trial. He lived a quiet life with his child bride until he died in 1951 at the age of 73. His models are still seen in the Museum of Science in Buffalo. Lila Jimerson married and lived in Perrysburg, New York, and despite her weak lungs, she lived until 1972. Clothilde Marchand's paintings were exhibited only once, in 1930, at a memorial tribute, according to her daughter, Henriette. She was a true artist who never had a chance. It is said that she took a backseat to her husband in order to not overshadow his art. The Ouija board murder of 1930 lingered like smoke over Buffalo, and the press, they got what they wanted. For weeks, the story sold papers, a tale of witches, seances, jealous mistresses, and a hammer dripping with blood. But this story was not about the supernatural. This story had two victims, Clotilde Marchand and Nancy Bowen. Lila was a victim of a manipulative man, but jealousy is never a reason to murder. In the end, the spirits didn't spell out the truth. The living did. My sources were the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Buffalo Courier Express and Buffalo Evening News, the Buffalo History Museum, the Forest Lawn Cemetery, Wikipedia, and the Marie Watts Studio.
That was a good one. I liked that.
Well, it's just kind of crazy. And I mentioned the Marie Watts Studio because in 2022, she did an installation at the Buffalo History Museum that was highlighting Seneca work, as well as putting Nancy Bowen's name on a neon on the front of the building to relate to this hashtag Say Her Name movement. And it was just to highlight how much racism played into this, the way that they used that these women were Native women. And that's the reason why there was witchcraft, even though the only person accused of being a witch was Clothilde Marchand, who was a French woman. They still played that up. They used words like red and other things that I'm not going to say. And it was really kind of awful the way that they did. And the installation was to bring awareness to how often Indigenous people are put aside or treated differently by police, which we know we live in
Mhm.
obviously we live on Duwamish land, but we also have seen over the years with missing persons, especially, that Indigenous people get left behind often in that.
Forgotten.
So forgotten. And just not given the same attention as, let's say a young white girl with blue eyes and blonde hair.
Mhm.
So, the installation is really beautiful. And if you want to check it out, you should go to the Buffalo History Museum because they will have more on it. But that was my case. I had never heard of the Ouija board murders.
Me either.
But that was a pretty intense one, and I loved all the twists and turns, and then I still believe that Henri was the one who told Lila. They even found, love letters to her from him where he was claiming that he loved her and everything. So she believed the only way to get out of this was to kill that Clotilde had to get out of the way, but he made it clear he would never divorce her. So she found a way around it. She
Yeah.
definitely pushed Nancy into it,
Right.
but it was masterminded, I think, by Henri, who was obviously a manipulator. And
Right,
it's
right.
super gross that he had to sleep with every woman that modeled for him so they would show, and he literally said, so they would show their breasts more.
Cute.
Yeah, he's nasty. And
That
then
is so gross.
after his wife dies, less than a year after she was brutally murdered by a hammer, he went and married her 18-year-old niece, and it felt like he was waiting for her to turn 18. I can't. Ugh.
I mean, I'm surprised he waited for her to turn 18, if we're being honest.
Truly. Truly. And the fact that she was like, he was married
A
to his wife.
relative.
He was married to his wife for a long time. There's no way he didn't watch that girl as a little girl.
No,
Like,
that's so
ugh,
gross.
it's so gross. Anyway, Autumn, why don't you tell us your story?
Okay, let's do this.
All right.
This episode is called The Lost Voices of Sedro Woolley.
Yes, I love
You
when it's something local.
Welcome to a special October episode. This month, I wanted to do something a little different. Usually, I tell stories that are firmly rooted in fact, crimes, disappearances, tragedies that leave questions behind. But this time of year, when the nights are stretched longer and the fog starts to linger, I think it's okay to wander a little closer to the edge of what can't be explained.
I wish people could see you and you were like holding a flashlight under your face or something. This feels
Yes,
very like a fireside camp story. I love it.
it is. Today's story comes from Sedro Woolley, Washington, a quiet town tucked into the foothills of the Cascades, once home to one of the state's largest psychiatric hospitals, a place that tried to heal people and ended up haunting generations instead. This is the story of Northern State Hospital and the voices it left behind. So let's take a walk back through the fields of Sedro Woolley to the quiet buildings still standing there, the ones that once held thousands of lives and thousands of secrets. Some say it's only history that lingers. Others aren't so sure. Either way, this is where our story begins. There's something about places that hold too much history. It doesn't just fade away when the doors close or when the people leave. It lingers in the air, in the walls, in the silence that settles after everything is gone. There's a place in Cedar Woolley, Washington, that still carries that kind of silence. It sits in the foothills of the Cascades, wide open fields, crumbling brick buildings, and a strange, quiet place that feels both comforting and heavy. If you didn't know what it once was, you might just think it was an old farm or a school long forgotten. But for more than 60 years, this was Northern State Hospital, one of the largest psychiatric institutions in the Pacific Northwest. And some say it really never let go of its past. Northern State opened in 1912, built on nearly 1,000 acres of farmland. Back then, it was considered modern, even humane. The idea was to give patients work and purpose, fresh air, and sunlight. There were dairy barns, orchards, greenhouses, a bakery, a laundry, and long rows of tidy red brick wards. It was its own small city, meant to be self sustaining, separate from the outside world. At first, that separation was part of the treatment philosophy, isolation from the stress of modern life. But over time, that distance became something else, something that made it easier to forget who was inside. By the 1940s and 50s, overcrowding had taken hold. Funding dropped, doctors came and went, and thousands of people lived and died within those walls. Many were admitted for things we would never institutionalize today: depression, anxiety, postpartum struggles, alcohol use. Some were sent here being difficult or simply unwanted. Their names filled ledgers that still exist, handwritten, careful script, but many of their graves don't bear names at all, only numbers. A few hundred feet beyond the hospital grounds sits a quiet patch of land, the Northern State Cemetery. More than 1,500 people are buried there, patients who never went home, their stories sealed under moss and soil. And this is where the stories begin to blur between what we know and what we feel, between history and haunting. Because in Sedro Woolley, people still talk about Northern State not as a ruin, but as a place that hums with something left behind. The hospital closed in the 1970s, but the buildings remain. Some are used by the county now, others stand empty, their windows shattered, vines creeping through the cracks. The underground tunnels are sealed in most places, but not all. And that's where the legends start. People say that if you stand near the tunnel entrances at night, you'll hear the sound of wheels echoing through the concrete, the faint rattle of gurneys being rolled down a hallway that doesn't exist anymore. Others have heard voices, soft, low, sometimes pleading, sometimes singing. There's a story about a woman in white who wanders near the old cemetery, drifting between the trees before dissolving into the fog. More on her shortly. And another about a patient who died in the children's ward, where investigators claim they've recorded laughter or the faint sound of music boxes playing from somewhere deep inside the building. Paranormal groups claim the children's wing is the most active building. There are stories of toys moving between visits and a woman's voice calling a child's name. Always the same one: Eddie. According to one local legend, Eddie was a baby boy who died at the hospital in the 1940s, and some say the woman in white is searching for him. A few ghost hunters have shared recordings that they say they made there: whispers of names, words like help, home, stay. The underground tunnel network connects several of the old hospital buildings. Staff once used them to transport supplies, laundry, and occasionally deceased patients discreetly, especially during winter. Even now, people say they hear sounds down there: gurney wheels rattling, footstep pacing, faint music boxes, or low murmurs that seem to answer when you whisper. I would pee my pants. Just
Wow.
saying.
Did you do that right now?
No, but I would. I would. One former groundskeeper reportedly refused to go into the tunnels after hearing a woman humming a lullaby when
Fuck
no
no.
one else was there.
Why is it always lullabies that are so creepy? It's even more creepy when it's a child's voice, but it's still creepy.
Yes. So, she's called the singing nurse, and a few
That even
visitors
sounds scarier.
well, a few visitors who've explored the hospital ruins after dark claim to have heard a woman singing softly from one of the upper floors, an old hymn or lullaby. When they went to investigate, they found the sound was coming from an empty hallway, windows open to the wind.
Of course.
A nearby plaque in the old staff quarters lists a nurse named Mary Elizabeth, who died in 1936 from pneumonia contracted while working with patients during an outbreak. Many believe she's the one still checking rooms.
Ring
And
around
I
the
know,
rosy.
so creepy. And yet, if you talk to people who've spent time on the grounds, park rangers, historians, even construction crews, most won't tell you it feels evil. They'll tell you it feels sad,
Aw,
still, and heavy, like a place waiting to be remembered. Now, back to the woman in white.
yeah.
They say that if you visit Northern State on a cold night when the fog hangs low over the fields and the air smells faintly of rain, you might see her. A
Doesn't the air
woman.
always smell faintly of rain in fall?
Kind of. I mean, right now it's kind of warm.
Sure, but welcome to Washington. It's
Yes,
a foggy time, it probably smells like rain.
probably. A woman dressed in white walking the edge of the old cemetery. Some people say she was a nurse, one of the kind ones, someone who stayed behind long after her shift ended, sitting beside patients who had no visitors,
Oh,
whispering to them so they wouldn't die alone. Others say she was a patient herself, a young woman admitted in the 1930s for what doctors called nervous exhaustion. That was what they called grief back then, or sadness, or being a woman who couldn't stop crying after losing someone she loved. Whichever story you believe, it ends the same way. She died here, and no one came to claim her body. She was buried in a numbered plot, one of hundreds under the same quiet ground she used to walk every evening. Now visitors say she still walks there. Some say her gliding between the trees near the cemetery. Others along the gravel path behind the old barns, a white blur at the edge of the fog. One person swore she saw her through a broken hospital window, standing perfectly still in the dark, but her face turned towards the fields. She never speaks, never moves quickly, never seems to notice the living at all. There's something sorrowful about her, not vengeful, not frightening, just waiting. One night, a pair of hikers said they watched her from the trail for almost a full minute. She was standing near the cemetery fence, her head bowed, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. When they tried to take a photo, the camera wouldn't focus, just a white shape in the fog. And then she was gone. The most common story says she appears when the air turns cold, especially in late fall, around the time the hospital used to hold memorial services for patients who had passed that year. Locals call her the woman in white, but sometimes they just call her the nurse. And maybe she is still watching over the people buried there, or maybe she's something the living created, a face for all the loss we can't explain, all the pain that was left behind those walls. Because when a place like Northern State holds that much sorrow, maybe it doesn't just disappear. Maybe it takes shape. Maybe it becomes her. And maybe that's the real haunting of Northern State. Not shadows or whispers or things unseen, but the memory of how easily people can be forgotten. In the early 1900s, mental illness was something most families didn't talk about or didn't want to be connected to. When someone was sent to a state hospital, they were often just gone, sometimes for life, sometimes buried without anyone ever visiting again. It's said that when Northern State closed, old patient records were boxed up and stored away, and many of the headstones were left unmarked. Only in recent years did volunteers and local historians begin to restore them, to put names back where numbers once stood. So maybe the reason people feel something there isn't is because it's haunted by ghosts, but because it's haunted by memories. by the stories that were silenced for decades. When the wind moves through the poplar trees and rustles the grass above the cemetery, it sounds almost like breathing, almost like a sigh. Today, parts of the old hospital grounds are used for community projects, agricultural programs, art installations, even guided tours. But the heart of it remains quiet, still standing, still watching, still waiting. People go there looking for ghosts, and maybe they find them. But what people really find is something else: the weight of time, the echo of the lives that pass through the remainder, that the line between the living and the remembered is thinner than we think. Because some stories don't need proof to be true, they just need someone willing to listen. Haunted places always leave room for doubt, for belief, or disbelief. But even if you don't believe in ghosts, some stories still find a way to follow you home. Maybe the haunting at Northern State isn't about what people claim to see, but what we choose to remember. Because sometimes remembering is the only way to let something rest. So that was my story. It's kind of a ghost story.
Do you wanna go there at night?
No. Do
I would
you?
totally yeah, I'd totally do that.
Maybe. I mean, I don't wanna be touched again.
I
But
remember there was a Ghost Hunters episode that they did at the hospital.
yeah, I didn't watch that, but I will now that I
I
didn't know you did
usually
that.
try to watch anything that says haunting and it mentions Washington State. I just wanna see. I think that no offense to ghost hunters, I'm sure they're listening, but, I always feel like, "Okay, this is a little silly," you know? They're like, "Did you hear that? What was that?" It's just a little bit silly to me, but I did watch that episode.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean,
My
I feel like in Seattle too or in Washington, we have a
we have
pretty
so many.
yeah, we have a pretty haunted place, especially because it's an old city, and then in Seattle proper, like, was built on top of the city that burnt down, so we've got a lot of ghosty connections and really old parts of the city that are notoriously haunted.
Mhm. Um, but before I forget, my sources were the Washington State Archives, Department of Social and Health Services records, Skagit County Historical Museum, Sedro Woolley Museum, Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, Northern State Hospital History.org, and I watched a couple YouTube videos. The most local history and exploration channel is Haunted Rooms of America, and that was my story. Because it's not, I mean, obviously,
Not ghost hunters?
no, I didn't watch that. I just, like, learned about that with you. But like I said in the beginning, I normally like to cover stories that are firmly rooted in fact, in the crimes
Yes.
and disappearances, but I thought I'd switch it up a little bit for the month of October and talk about a haunting, because you can't really prove a haunting, but
No.
I wanted to
I
talk about it,
I have to say I love that the historians are going and
giving
fixing
people
yeah,
names.
giving people
Me too.
names. I love that they found the records to do that
Me too. Me too.
because I'm surprised that they weren't lost over the years or damaged. I mean, I don't think they were stored in the building or anything because the
No.
building's abandoned, but it is really, really creepy looking. I gotta be completely honest.
Well,
I
maybe we'll
think
make a trip there.
yeah, maybe we'll do a live recording of us there. That'd be really fun. Autumn would hate it.
Yes, I was to say, I don't know how fun that would be, but I'm down for it.
Yeah. Autumn is a believer, folks, in the paranormal.
Yes, I'm terrified of it.
Yes. And when we were in San Francisco, we went on a ghost tour and we went down this area in Chinatown and there's this alleyway where women had gone missing or had been killed and they said people can feel like they're touched there. So they asked the whole group who would volunteer to go down and stand there first? And I raised my hand. I was like, me, send me. So I went down there and I was like, touch me. Nothing. I got nothing. And then Autumn went, and she was, like, standing there, and we're all, like, watching her. It's very odd, uncomfortable situation, just stand there and stare at someone. And then all of a sudden, Autumn goes, "Did you do that?" And I was like, "No," because I was far away. "No." And then she was like, "I swear to God, I felt
I
somebody."
still swear she did it.
I was, like, 30 feet away from you. There was no way I could do it.
I still feel it was her.
I was standing there. I blew really hard
I don't
so
trust
you
her.
could
She's
feel
always
it.
fucking with me.
It is facts. I do always fuck with Autumn. It's not my fault that you're gullible and you somehow still believe me.
I mean, it kind of is your fault. You're my friend. I'm supposed to trust you.
When Autumn traveled for work, I seriously would mess with her all the time. I'd be like,
It
"Wait,
was
what
so
hotel are you
fucked
staying
up.
in?" I would
It was
send, like,
so fucked up.
elaborate stories that were made up out of my head with creepy pictures that I Googled, and I would
She's
be like,
not
"Wait,
lying.
you're in room 236? You won't believe what happened there." She's like, "What? I never found that." I'm like, "Yeah, there's, like, a whole thing on it. If you see this guy in the hallway," like, a whole I'm the worst.
She
I'm the
is such
worst.
an asshole.
Yep, I am. I am an asshole. I'm a fibber. I think it's funny.
Dude, she convinced everyone, including myself, that I had something called the three sneeze disease because I always sneeze 3
That's the
times.
layman term.
Mhm.
We shoulda had Tim confirm that it exists.
Yeah. Diagnosed 3
If you
sneeze
sneeze 3 times,
disease.
yeah.
It's awful.
Oh my god, because we used to walk around Green Lake all the time, and
We
when
did.
yeah, we'd go walk my dog around Green Lake, and we would talk, and for some reason I don't know what came over me, I was just like, "Oh my god, do you know that you have this?" Just me just pull that shit right
She
out.
is,
I
like,
used, like, a
such a
name.
good storyteller, let's just say that.
I used just, like, a medical term that I probably heard on, like, House or some fucking show that I knew wasn't, like, a common term, and then I was like, "But in layman's term, they call it 3 sneeze disease," and Autumn's like, "Are you messing with me? Are you fucking with me?" And I was like, "No, not at all," and then, like, halfway halfway around, I was like, "Yeah, I was totally making that all up. Don't tell anybody."
No, you didn't tell me halfway around. You like, I waited. I told people I had that, and
No, I think you told your parents.
I told people I had that, okay? No one questioned me, and then
So, if you'd
you
like to donate to
confessed.
Autumn's 3 sneeze disease fund.
We're replacing the new chair with the 3 sneeze disease fund.
Hey, when does your new
There's no
chair come
cure.
in?
A couple weeks still.
Ah, but excited that it's happening.
Yeah.
And we have something really fun and exciting that we're doing this weekend. We are
Yes.
going
Yeah,
we
we're
are
going to a
going
farm
to a farm, you guys, listen, to pet baby Highland cows. I can't. I'm dead. I
and
love
get
it.
pictures
And get pictures. Maybe we'll post them,
and
and then you
feed
can see
them.
that we actually see each other in person.
Yes, we do actually see each
Since
other.
since we record remotely, but
Yes,
I'm very excited about this. I don't know
me too.
if you don't know what a Highland cow looks like, then you're
Google it.
crazy. Yeah, Google it because 'cause
Google
they're the
it.
cutest fucking things ever, and I grew up with cows, so I love them, and I cannot wait to get my hands on a little calf.
Yeah, we're very
I
excited.
There's a chance I might try to sneak it in my car, but, it's whatever.
Pretty big. They're like 300 pounds.
That's fine. I had a 150-pound dog. I'll be fine. It's just like 2 of them.
Okay.
Anywho, we want to thank you again so much for listening, especially on that last episode. We appreciate so many new listeners. That was
Yes,
really
yes, yes.
awesome.
It did really well.
Yeah, it was great. I think too, like knowing that you were getting an update on Yogurt Shop was a big key reason why people were like, I want to know what happened. Because
It
it
was
wasn't,
so great. Like, oh, and
oh,
how I mentioned in there, I was like, "Oh,
oh, yes,
DNA
that's
under the
right.
fingernails," and I didn't like, I was like, "I'm just using that as an
It's as
example."
example.
It actually is the reason one of the reasons they were able to get DNA is because one of them fought really hard and there was DNA underneath their fingernails.
So Autumn is clairvoyant
Right?
and
Like, I just knew. I just
she knew
knew.
it. She knew it. No, it's really exciting. So we are going to be back next week with another episode and another spooky episode. So look
Mhm.
forward to seeing that and do follow us on Instagram and TikTok and share with your friends. Tell everybody to listen to our podcast. We appreciate all of you. We hope you are having
All of
a
you.
Lovely spooky season so far, and we will be back again next week. Bye.